How you doing?
Good, good. How's it going?
Going all right. Thanks for getting up early.
Oh yeah, no problem. Hope you don't mind if I drink some tea while we talk.
No, you go right ahead. Like I said, it's for some reason I've been getting, everyone on the West Coast coming to join us for our little interview chats lately, and y'all all been great. So
Good. I'll try not to blow the streak.
yeah, we're ready. You're ready. My wife's getting everything set up.
Oh, nice.
So she's the technology one.
No, not really.
Oh, hold on.
You work in IT?
Not that. You ready? Wait, hang on.
Hold on. I've disappeared, I think.
Well, we can see you.
Okay.
Yep.
Let me
I can
see.
still see you on the screen.
Well, I guess that's all, man. I don't need to see. Well, hold on. Let me.
I'm not that important. You don't have to see me.
I can't see. Hold on. Where'd it go? That's bizarre. Oh, there we are. Okay. I think the window just popped off my. Anyway.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think we've been using Zoom now for the last few weeks, so we're still trying to get everything worked out with the speaker and the microphones, and it's like.
Yeah, this is like my third time using Zoom, and yeah, I'm still an ingenue. Still trying to figure it out.
Are you ready to start? All right, well, kick us off.
I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm
Hi,
Philip.
Jacqueline. Hi, Philip. Good to see you both.
Good seeing you both. And we're doing a Richmond Comics Weekend update. And we're going to start out with our interview with Mark Russell, who has so graciously decided to wake up early out on the West Coast and join us for our noontime luncheon. So is it nice and sunny out there?
Yeah, it is now. It's deceptively sunny because it was raining all night, so it's like sunny but extremely wet.
Gotcha.
Which is not uncommon for Oregon.
Well, yeah.
I would love to be in Oregon.
Yeah, you will have to get out there someday. We keep saying
yeah, it's nice when it's not raining. It's really nice. Even when it is raining, it's pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like in Richmond, it pretty much the weather is. It could be something like right now, and then like 5 minutes from now, it could be a tornado, and then 10 minutes later, it'd be 90 degrees and sunny. It's
bipolar.
Yeah, we definitely have like very bipolar weather in Richmond.
Here's is always constantly 60 degrees and drizzling.
I can deal with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Summers are beautiful, but yeah, the rest of the year is just 60 degrees and drizzling.
Yeah, that's probably more my style. All right, we'll get started. Mark, if you wouldn't mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. I'm a comic book writer by means of accident. I just sort of stumbled into this medium, but I wouldn't imagine doing anything else. You might know me from titles. I think most people know me from the Hanna-Barbera stuff I did for DC, like the Flintstones and Snagglepuss. And I also, there you go. Thank you for the plug. Also, I've done Wonder Twins and Second Coming. I'm doing now for Ahoy. Yep, awesome. Yeah, I'm all lined up. It's ready to go.
Yep. This is what we know you from.
I got into comics because I wrote those two books, God is Disappointing You and Apocrypha Now, which are retellings of the Bible, both the canonical Bible and God is Disappointing You, and the non-canonical Bible from the Jewish and Christian oral traditions in Apocrypha Now. And from those, I somehow got segued into working in comics.
Sounds good. So during all this time, I'm sure you're usually running around and maybe going to conventions and doing stuff, but now you're basically in lockdown. So how are you handling that?
Largely like this, doing like a lot of like online interviews and little digital Comic-Con panels and stuff. But yeah, it's been a mixed bag because I really enjoy going to the cons because it's one of my, unlike other performing arts like writing, you just sort of do it in isolation. You don't really do it in front of an audience. like you would if you were an actor or a singer or something. So the cons were sort of like your chance to meet the audience, to get the audience reaction, albeit like a year after you'd written something, so I really kind of missed that component of the medium. But at the same time, it's given me it's made life a little more peaceful. I can spend more time writing and relaxing and hanging out with the fam, and not as much time running around from eating $6 pretzels and turkey wraps at the cons. So it's a mixed thing.
Right. So during this time, have you created some any new hobbies for yourself, or do you have like old hobbies that you picked back up again?
Yeah, I just sort of deeply regressed into my own catatonic state. I just sort of I read a lot more. It's like I only really had time for like a couple hobbies before, and I've just sort of floundered into them even more deeply. I haven't really picked up anything new. I wish I could say I learned the trombone or something, but it hasn't been like that. I've just sort of been doing more of the things I did before: watching movies, reading, writing. I used to draw a lot more though, and I haven't drawn very much because the writing schedule's been so aggressive over the last couple of years. So one thing is I've been able to draw a little more, which is nice.
Gotcha. So did you start out drawing before writing, or is that just kind of went hand in hand?
No, I drew before and completely independently of writing. I'm not a very good visual artist. I would never be able to draw something that would be able to pass off as like a professional comic book artist. But I could draw my own little cartoons and stuff, and that's how I really got started, was just drawing my own cartoons. And it's nice. And sometimes I still draw. When I'm working on a comic book, I'll draw an image to match what I'm thinking of to send to an artist. Like, this is kind of what I'm talking about. And so I'll try to in my crappy rendering, I'll give them something that they can then make look good.
Right. Well, I mean, don't give up, because Tom King seems to do very well with his little stick figures that he does at conventions.
I'm better than Tom King at drawing. Anyway. I will say that much. I've at least cleared that bar.
Oh, God.
Well, I mean, it's
Not a high bar.
won't say it's a high bar.
People will come up to me at the cons not knowing who I am, obviously, and they'll assume I'm an artist, and they'll say, "Oh, can you draw me something?" And I will draw them something if they ask me. It might not be what they had envisioned. I do a lot of drawing of like Batman in a hot tub, because then I only have to draw him from like the chest up.
Now I have.
That's my sort of cheat.
That's funny. Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah, that's definitely a sketchbook worthy in there.
So what made you write these books? Like, what did you have in mind when you started this process?
Well, it started with a conversation in a bar, which really sort of informed the rest of the project. It really is sort of like the Bible is explained to somebody in a bar. I was having some drinks with my friend Shannon Wheeler, who did the cartoons in those books. And he was telling me, he had this like sort of hippie upbringing in San Francisco. His sister was literally born at the corner of Haight and Ashbury in the 60s. So like he's like, hippiness is in his genes. So he had no idea what the Bible was about. His parents were really these well-adjusted hippies and never bothered to teach him, about hell or anything. So he said, I have no idea. People talk about the Bible. I have no idea what they're talking about. And he gave Job as an example. So I just told him the story of Job, because I had the polar opposite upbringing. I was brought up, sort of a semi-rural, like deeply conservative, evangelical household. So I thought I understood the Bible. At least I'd grown up with the Bible. What I really came to understand, though, is that I only understood about 1% of the Bible that was useful for them to teach me. So anyway, I told him the story of Job in like a paragraph or two, and he's like, "Oh, that's perfect. You should do the whole Bible just like that, and I'll draw cartoons and we'll have a book." So that was really what started it. And then as I thought this will be easy because I grew up with the Bible. I've been going. I went to church from as long as I can remember till like 18, 19 years old. Like I know the Bible inside and out. But it wasn't until I started working on the book I realized just how little of the Bible I actually knew. and and also how little of the Bible most people who claim to be Bible believing Christians actually know. They only read like, you know, the a few select passages that are read over and over in church or in Sunday school. The, you know, 9/10 of the iceberg is under the water. So that was kind of what I wanted to do, is bring the rest of the iceberg above the sea line and let them see what the Bible actually said.
Right. Yep. That's I use your books a lot in those examples, because I too, like yourself, was brought up, you know, very, very much in the church. And once again, it's the percentage that they want us to learn. And I branched out, then I found your work, and guys disappointed in me. And I'm like, well, when I first saw the title, I'm like, well, I got to have this because I know it's true. So, and yeah, it was,
it was sort of like a self-reflective title. It's like, oh, you know, I failed my family. I failed my, you know, the faith. But when I was writing the book, like, no, really, they failed me, because the Bible is so much more complex and,
right.
and so much more interesting than I was taught. You know, I had no choice, but I wasn't really turning my back on Christianity so much as I was turning my back on the two-dimensional way in which it was taught to me.
Right.
And really the self-serving way in which it's been presented to followers, because Christianity, when it started as the religion of Christ, was about like how to escape the Roman Empire without actually having to like draw your sword. And the answer he largely came out with was like, you know, drop out. Don't be someone that they can bribe. Don't be someone who they you know, is like playing by their rules, and you will have defeated the Roman Empire. And the problem came that when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, that message was no longer useful to them. So they had to sort of twist Christianity into being this sort of like religion of conformity, this religion of like, well, you should always follow the law and do what the emperor says and render unto Caesars and that's really where it sort of, you know, the Christianity has kind of like been sort of perverted by the institutions that need it to get people to fall in line. It's been used in the opposite manner in which it was intended ever since.
Right. Yeah. So when you came out with those, or came out with guys disappointed in you, did you yourself see a lot of backlash on that from, you know, just from people from the outside, or did it just fly enough under the radar where it was like you really didn't hear anything from anyone?
Yeah, I think more of the second one. The weird thing is that, you know, I wrote 2 books about the Bible and didn't really get a lot of backlash, but I got like a ton of flack from people when I messed with the Flintstones. So it's like,
that's funny.
people's priorities are a little weird.
Yeah.
No, Second Coming is where I got the backlash.
Right. Yeah.
A comic book about the Bible. I think the difference is that people will actually read a book before they'll decide that they hate it. Whereas a comic book, the second it's announced, they have an opinion about it.
Oh,
Yeah. That's like one of the examples we use here a lot is Robert Crumb's Genesis. Like, it's basically a complete retelling of Genesis, just with pictures. So like everyone hates that book.
Yeah, and it's really not
It's
taking
like,
any liberties at all. It's just sort of like, here's an image that's
right.
based upon this verse that you claim to have built your life around.
Right.
But I think it's not so much that they find his message or his meaning offensive, or even really the same with Second Coming. It's not that they really find Second Coming offensive, because people were up in arms about it before they even had a chance to read it. It's
Right.
that they find the idea that somebody else would have an opinion, or that somebody else would think they had the right to control the narrative other than the institutions they've chosen to give that control to, or that they've just assumed have control of that narrative. And I think that's what they want. Or that's what they're afraid of. It's not the heterodoxy of these crazy approaches to the Bible. It's more like they feel like it's their intellectual property. So anybody else talking about it is sort of like, you know, infringing on their copyright.
Were you surprised at the backlash from Second Coming at all? I mean,
Yeah,
like,
I
the premise was great, and then you read, all you get to read is the premise, and then like right after that, it's like just this wave of like, it's like, where did this come from?
Yeah, I really was kind of surprised by, which in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have been, but I was really surprised because I thought that people, one, they would give it a chance before, getting upset about it, that they would
Right.
actually read a page before they formed an opinion, which was completely wrong. They just flew off the handle immediately. And also that, people would be cool enough to realize that in these times, there's a lot of people with sort of unorthodox or sort of unusual opinions about faith. And we live in like a liberal Western society where that's okay, which again, I completely, underestimated the powers of orthodoxy in this country.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. Like it hit the previews here, when we heard about it and hit it and we're like, this is going to be something that we're going to love. And then like, it rolled downhill and, we're getting messages from DC and then getting other things. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah. And I don't fault DC. It was probably, a bridge, always going to be a bridge too far for them, because from their perspective, they're in the business of like selling, Batman lunch boxes and T-shirts and stuff, and billion-dollar movie franchises. And why would you risk any of that for this comic book about, superhero sharing an apartment with Jesus Christ? So I don't really fault them for sort of losing their nerve. But I'm glad that they were gracious enough to give me the rights back so I could take it to Ahoy, which unlike DC is like a company that needs publicity. It was just a brand new company and they needed the publicity. Even bad publicity was good publicity for them.
Right.
And they didn't have like this billion-dollar line of merchandise and movie deals that they were putting at risk with by publishing it. So it worked out well for everyone, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it did. They did a good job with it. So in the staying with Second Coming, in the back of the trade, you basically talked about, I guess, a lot of these characters that you used in here, something you created a long time ago.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about Second Coming is that like almost all of it was written like a year before it actually came out. So these are all like a lot of characters that I had been sitting on. And even then, like when I was writing it, some of the characters, especially the supporting characters that show up in the group therapy sessions, were based upon a 10-minute play that I'd written.
Right.
Like Night Justice and Lady Razor and even, Sunstar were all based on characters I did from this play I wrote about superheroes and villains kind of like working things out through the talking cure in a group therapy session.
Yeah, I found that pretty interesting. So talking about the Flintstones, as you're talking about the backlash on it. So from my perspective, I'll be honest, it was really strange that the best book on a shelf during that period of time was the Flintstones. As owner of a comic shop and stuff, it's like, to be honest, it's like, why is the Flintstones the best book on a shelf right now? And it's just one of those strange things. So, and then you talk about the backlash and all that. So were you approached to do Flintstones, or was it something that you wanted to pitch and so you pitched it, or how did that all play out?
I didn't really want to do the Flintstones. I hadn't even really thought about doing it, but I was approached because they liked the work I did on Prez, even though that got canceled after 6 issues. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do the Flintstones, because I didn't really have very good memories of watching the Flintstones when I was a kid. I mostly remember being sort of haunted by the fact that there was like a little bird that lived inside a camera and only came out when somebody needed a picture. That just sort of like really sort of weirded me out when I was a kid.
Vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, right. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do the Flintstones, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to talk about this, how weird it is that we all sort of like are seen as just these functions, these roles that we play for other people. We aren't really allowed the respect of having a right or a worth to exist in our own sort of being. And so the same way that like Fred Flintstone is treated by Mr. Slade as just sort of this disposable commodity, Fred is in turn treating the vacuum cleaner and the bowling ball and all those like house appliances. So that was kind of the I said, the reason that I decided I would do the Flintstones is I wanted to talk about civilization and its discontents.
Right.
Like the way in which the civilization and Bedrock being the world's first civilization kind of got the ball rolling downhill for the rest of us.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was definitely a lot of thought provoking stuff, and the way you write it is in there. It's pretty good.
I apologize to anybody who was, expecting a tasteful homage to the cartoon, but there's really no point in writing a tasteful homage because, if you're going to take on an existing IP, I think you should be doing something different with it, not just trying to like blend seamlessly into the artistic history of it, because to me that's just forgettable. And what's the point? What's the point of writing anything if it's not something new?
Yeah, well, like I said,
It was excellent.
yeah, we already had the old Flintstones, and so this one it was definitely what was needed at the time, and still today. I mean, it's still probably one of my favorite books.
Well, thank you. I had a really good time writing it, and I think largely because DC just let me get away with pretty much whatever I wanted with it, which is a freedom you don't get when you're dealing with the crown jewels,
Right.
So the fact that they gave me this sort of rental car, allow me to drive it wherever I wanted, was really nice. It was a great way to sort of wet my beak in comics.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What? You can do that right now.
We're gonna do a giveaway for
Okay.
issues 1 through 12 later. I just wanted to let everybody know.
Wow.
Yeah. Once again, we here think everyone should read the Flintstones.
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
I endorse that position.
yeah. So basically, so after that, you came out with, or the next thing we read for you was Exit Stage Left. So how is that really writing a historical fiction book using Snagglepuss?
Well,
I
to
mean,
me, I start with the character and what I know about the character, and I build the story out from there. And so for Snagglepuss, the two things I knew about Snagglepuss were that he clearly has a background in theater, because both his catchphrases, Exit Stage Left and Heavens to Murgatroyd, are both like theater references. So I thought, well, okay, this guy was in theater at some point, and I knew he was a gay icon. So I was like, okay, so he's a gay icon who was in theater and he debuted in cartoons in 1959. What would have been happening before then, in the 1950s, that would have forced him to leave theater? And then the first thing that popped in mind was probably some sort of Lavender Scare, McCarthy era, witch hunt, and so that kind of I built the story around that.
Gotcha. So was this also? I'm just curious. Was this a story in itself that you wanted to tell, and you were just able to tell through Snagglepuss? Was it something that you already had? Because
it's weird. It was something I pitched without realizing that I was pitching it. I was just on Facebook, and I was posting these sort of what I thought were funny bits of dialogue between Snagglepuss and Huckleberry Hound, as if they are both sort of Southern Gothic, playwrights. Like Snagglepuss is Tennessee Williams, and then Huckleberry Hound is William Faulkner, and they're talking this very sort of purple, over descriptive way, and the describing their day in these very melodramatic ways. And I was just doing it as a gag. But then Marie Javins, my editor at DC, said, "Oh, by the way, your pitch for the Snagglepuss comic has been approved." And oh, geez, now I got to actually write a comic based on this.
That's fun.
Way to go.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
It was really her vision that made it happen.
That's pretty funny. So especially out of this, like I said, it's reading Snagglepuss. It's basically historical fiction the way you wrote it out. So how much, in all of these stories, how much research do you put into these books? Or do you just know all of this stuff? Because there's so much in these books that it's how do you, know all this, or to do the research of all of this?
It's a little of both, because you have to know what is, you have to know something to begin with to even know what to research. But yes, I wanted it to be like a Cold War story during the McCarthy era, because I felt that in a way it was sort of a relevant historical period to what we were going through in 2017, which was sort of the global slide into fascism, and the idea that there's real Americans, and then there's subversives and the line is being drawn in the sand between the real Americans and those who support a more inclusive, multicultural, and the Americans who like stand for nationalism, the Americans who stand for humanity, basically. And I wanted to write a story that was relevant to what I was witnessing, the lines I was witnessing being drawn in America at the same time I was writing it.
Gotcha. So with all this type of like writing you've done, you said you do some drawing and everything, and with all this, so what got you into writing? Like what made you lead you into this?
Jeez, I wish I knew.
You said it was an accident.
I could have stopped myself, but no, I've just always been, as long as I can remember, I've always written stuff. And I think that Scott Adams, or not Scott Adams, gosh, I forget the who, but somebody once said that art is whatever you do that you don't need for your survival. And I think that's kind of when I realized I was a writer, because I was writing when nobody was telling me to write. I was a writer when nobody was publishing it, nobody was interested in what I had to say. I would still just write stuff and put it in my drawer. And so I think I've always been a writer. That's always been my art, because it's been what made me feel like I sort of had a place in the universe.
Right. So, okay, that's pretty cool. So so we know you got backlash on the Flintstones. Did you get that kind of backlash with Snagglepuss from people, or did it
a little bit?
Yeah,
a little bit of backlash from Snagglepuss, but not really a lot. Not as much as I probably should have. But yeah, the funniest backlash I got was like Breitbart did an article about Snagglepuss. It was like, one of their Culture Wars articles, like they're turning Snagglepuss into a gay man, and the picture they showed in the article was like Snagglepuss making out with his boyfriend. And then in the comments section below the article, somebody said, that lion better be a girl, which I thought was hilarious, because they're not bothered by the bestiality at all. It's just
that doesn't mean anything. That's not a problem.
That's completely normal. Disney made that normal a long time ago.
Technically, Superman and Lois Lane is bestiality, because Superman's from another planet. He's a different species.
Never thought of that.
Yeah, well, it's all fast and loose. Yeah, it's all relative. So coming out of that, I guess one of your, not second coming, but your other book that kind of just ended at the end of last year was Wonder Twins. So once again, you kind of took these characters that no one was really asking for, no one has really talked a whole lot about in years, and you pretty much made it where people wanted to read Wonder Twins. Like, why do you think that is? I mean, what do you do writing wise, or how do you put a process in that to where, like, there's no one clamoring coming into a shop sitting there going, if there was only your Wonder Twins comic, but then you start putting a story out there and it's like people start coming in, it's like, was the next issue of Wonder Twins out?
Well, I think, well, thank you, first of all, but I think a lot of it is just writing as though, writing what you really want to write, and not writing just something, because there's two kinds of writers. There's, and I'm probably going to pay for making this analogy, but there's mercenaries, and then there's suicide bombers. And the mercenaries, like, oh yeah, I could write a few Punisher issues. I can get there and I'll shoot a few people. I'll shoot a few issues off, and I'll be gone, and you'll never even know I was there. I can just write seamlessly in the voice of that character, and I'm gone. And then you got suicide bombers who are like, all I can do is walk. My only skill is to walk into the middle of a crowded, airport or whatever, and blow myself up. And for better or for worse, it doesn't matter what the character says or what the job is. I'm not skilled enough to be a mercenary. All I can do is really just blow myself up on the page. And that's the way I try to approach writing. It doesn't matter which character I'm writing, or which franchise I'm writing. I'm really writing about myself and the things that haunt me about the world. And so I just sort of blow myself up on the page, and then my only really thought about the characters I'm writing is like, in what way does this character connect to what I'm feeling? What way does this character connect to what I'm experiencing in the world? And with Wonder Twins, the connection was obviously that we are handing a world that's deeply screwed up to this generation of 17, 18, 19-year-olds who have no idea what they're getting into because we've screwed it up so badly for them. And much like the Wonder Twins, they come here from another planet and they don't realize how screwed up the Earth is, and then they're basically expected to fix it. So that's kind of like the role that the post millennials, the Generation Z kids are being put in. So I wanted to write a comic about that experience, and also just as somebody who's older is partially to blame for having screwed up the planet so badly. I want to say, kind of apologize. Like, sorry, kids. Here's what we've left you.
Yeah.
Not the
Part
one.
dystopia, part after school special, I guess.
Yeah, it was. I think for me, once again, I reading it, I was kind of astonished at how basically like every single issue you gave us a story that challenged something. I think like issue 2 or 3, you basically challenged like the private prison system, but then you kept building in, this larger story that made it through 12, after it got repicked. So I think that to me was interesting, is like, yeah, each little issue we're going to hit something, but then we're going to make it this overarching, story.
Well, I was really glad that it was extended to 12 issues because there was so much story that I wasn't able to get into the first 6 issues, that I really had a really good framework for doing another 6 when they allowed to extend to 12, and allowed me to like also do more of these, which I find kind of the most gratifying, these issues that don't necessarily push the main plot forward very much, but that allow you to sort of explore the world that you created and like talk about single issues, or to like do a whole issue that just talks about like one thing in the world that's bothering you.
Gotcha. So were you on that one just because it was a more strict of even though they're oddball characters, they're still kind of DC proper? Were you given like guidelines of things you couldn't do in that book, or they're like, just go write the Wonder Twins and we'll see what happens?
No, I wish it were like that, but yeah, it was more restrictive, especially because it's bumping up against the crown jewels, like Batman showing up, Superman showing up, and they're writing specifically for this teen audience. So yeah, it was a lot more restrictive. I couldn't do a Snagglepuss with the Wonder Twins, and it created some friction early on because I wanted to do something that was a little more adult, or a little more a little darker. But they pulled me back on that, which in the end I think worked out well, because it allowed me to like find the tonality of the book, and make it more about like, I think the final tonality turned out really well in that it's it's part after school special, and it wouldn't have had that sort of like feeling of just being sort of fun and accessible to like readers in their teens if they hadn't pulled me back a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, it definitely ended up being a very hopeful book throughout the process.
Yeah, I think that was the thing too, is like they made me think about like, well, what are the hopeful? It's enough. It's one thing to say, well, here's this sewer that you live in, have fun. It's another thing to say, but there's things we could do to make this a paradise, and it really got me thinking about that second part of the equation, which I think is ultimately more challenging, and ultimately more important than just describing how things are screwed up.
Right. Yep. So we'll really quick, we'll talk about Billionaire Island a little bit, since that kind of just started. An issue came out. So do you find it strange sometimes that you write these stories and you kind of push the envelope, but yet real life keeps one-upping you all the time? I mean, is that
constantly being outflanked by reality? It's almost impossible to write satire anymore, because it's like you're writing a comic about the end of the world, and then the world comes to a halt.
Yeah.
Please leave some room for the imagination.
Yeah, it's kind of, you're like reading this and you're like, well, you just can't one up anything anymore. It's always there. So.
And tragically, a lot of the things you write about tend to stay relevant for long after you've written them. These problems don't seem to go away. The solutions you prefer no one seems to ever take you up on them. So yeah, which is good news for you as a writer, bad news for you as a human being.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you just kind of have to play in that realm. So do you have any, so like in just the back of your mind, do you have any other big type stories that you have planned out over time, or are you just like solely focusing right now on like Billionaire Island and other things, or you've got like these other 20 books in your mind that you're just ready to explode?
Yeah, I do have other projects in mind, and some of which I'm already working on that haven't been announced yet. Yeah, and I also got a graphic novel I want to write. I'm considering doing the artwork myself for, but it's about
Okay.
the first manned mission to Mars. And the premise is that like there's been this natural deposit, this huge deposit of natural gas on Mars that's been discovered. So all the energy companies are scrambling to get somebody on Mars so they can claim the land that the natural gas is sitting on for themselves. And the company that wins does so because they find this guy who's dying of cancer, and they get him to sign an agreement whereby they will fly him to Mars. They don't have, because he's dying of cancer, they don't have to fly him back. They can just put him on a one-way rocket to Mars, and he's going to claim the land for them and die, and then they'll pay his family after he's dead. And it's all told in the form of this guy's diary. So this guy's on the ship to Mars, knowing he's never going to come back. He's writing about his regrets and about his life back on Earth, his thoughts about it. And then the story ends when he actually does get to Mars, and you know what happens to him there. But I've written a lot of it. I haven't drawn really any of it, but I'm a little scared to start drawing because I'll probably quickly realize I'm not nearly good enough to do it. But that's one thing I'm really looking forward to.
That sounds awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, that sounds really, really good.
Right up your alley.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is right up my alley. So, well, Mark, I think that's pretty much all we had for you this morning to go through that list. I mean, we probably could keep you here all day long talking with a lot of this stuff because it's
Your favorite topic.
yeah, it's pretty much everything that you write is pretty much hit my topics that I love as far as satire and everything.
Well, thank you so much. That's really nice.
So it's been really good. But once again, Mark, we appreciate it, and thanks for joining us this morning. And hopefully we'll get to see you sometime soon at a convention somewhere.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love to be able to travel again.
Yeah, it would be nice. All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Bye. See you later. In meeting here.